Wyoming Territory. Late spring of 1878, snow still clung to the mountain crests, but the ground had softened, and the wagon trains rolled west again. The first time Sawyer Nolan saw her, she was hunched near a dying wagon fire, her dress gray with trail dust, eyes locked on a crust of bread in someone else's hand. She was not begging, not even asking, just watching, like hunger was a thing she had befriended days ago and now sat beside it in silence. He was riding slow past the circled wagons, leading his bay horse and chewing jerky when he caught her glance, brief, sharp, and proud. A man could miss it. He did not. He stepped toward her without thinking, pulled the last of his hard biscuit from his saddlebag and crouched beside her without asking. "Here," he said, holding it out. "It ain't hot, but it's clean." She blinked once. "I did not ask you for anything. I know. But I am offering it anyway." She took it slow, fingers brushing his. Her hands were scraped at the knuckles, red beneath broken nails. She held the bread without eating it. "Thank you," she said, quiet. Sawyer nodded and sat beside her in the dirt. The fire popped. Around them, mothers hushed crying babies, men repaired axles, and the mountains watched like old gods. He looked at her again, tried not to, failed. "What is your name?" he asked. "Cora Granger," she said, voice still tight. He waited, and when she looked at him again, he said, "Sawyer Nolan." She gave the smallest nod. "You with this train?" "No," he said. "Been riding alone. Traded horses at the last way station. Thought I'd ride alongside a while, safer, I figure." She finally bit into the bread. Her eyes closed for a moment, and he looked away to give her that moment. "You alone?" he asked. She hesitated, then said, "Yes." Sawyer studied her face, sunbitten, tired, but not defeated. "You got a wagon?" "No, been walking since Fort Laramie. I was with a family who took me on for work. They left me 3 nights back." He felt something hot rise in his chest. "They left you. They said I was slowing them down." She said it like it was a math problem, not a betrayal. Her voice did not break, but it was thinner now. "You look like you have not eaten in days," he said. "I have eaten," she answered. "Just not today." He pulled a second biscuit from his coat, he had been saving it, and handed it over without speaking. She took it, slower this time, eyes meeting his. "Why are you being kind to me?" Sawyer looked at the fire. "Because I saw you hungry. And because I have more than you do." Silence again. Not awkward, just tired. He stood. "You got a bedroll?" She shook her head. He slipped off his horse and pulled his extra blanket from the side pouch. "Sleep by my fire tonight. It is not much, but I will keep close and no one will bother you." She looked at him long. "You could be lying." "I could," he said, "but I am not." She stood slowly, bread clutched in her hand. "Then I will take the blanket. But I do not owe you anything. Not asking you to." He led her to his fire, away from the main cluster, near a small ridge of rocks. It was quiet there. He spread the blanket and sat by the flames, watching her settle down with the caution of a woman who had learned the world did not offer safety for free. She laid curled on her side, back to the fire, but not far from him. "Cora," he said softly. She did not turn. "If you ever want to leave this train, I will take you. I have nowhere to go. I do." She was quiet a long time, then whispered, "Why does it matter to you?" He stared into the fire. "Because I do not want to pass by someone like you and pretend I did not see them." She did not answer. But she did not move away either. By morning she was still there. Her face was pale but calmer. She accepted the coffee he handed her and even took a strip of jerky, this time without protest. "I will walk," she said. "You can ride," he offered. "I said I will walk." He nodded. "Then I will walk with you." They moved beside the wagons, dust rising around their boots. The trail was hard, but she did not complain. He watched her, how she helped a woman gather spilled apples without waiting to be thanked, how she kept to herself but never let a child cry nearby without offering a distraction. She was not soft, but she still cared. That stayed with him. That night, he cooked beans over their fire. She sat closer now, knees tucked under her chin. "My father was a blacksmith," she said, "in Missouri. He died 3 winters ago, then my mother after that. I just kept going," he listened. "I had a little brother. He got sick. There was nothing we could do." He handed her a plate. "No one should be out here alone." She met his eyes. "You are." "Not anymore," he said. A week passed. Then, too, they shared food, fire, silence. He never touched her without asking. She never asked for anything, but when he offered his coat in the cold, she took it. When he asked if she wanted to ride, she finally said yes. One night, under the stars, she looked at him long. "Why are you still walking beside me?" she asked. He leaned back on his elbows, watching the sky. "I think I would like to walk beside you for the rest of my life." She frowned, studying him. "I have nothing, no land, no dowry, no name worth carrying." "You have my bread," he said gently. "And if you want it, you can carry my name." She stared at him, stunned. "I mean it," he said. "Marry me, Cora. I will build us something solid. You will not have to wonder where you sleep again." Her voice shook. "You do not even know what I am worth." "I do," he said, "and I think I have known since that night by the fire." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back. "I do not cry easy," she said. "I do not mind if you do," he replied. She reached for his hand. He held it, and she whispered, "Yes." That night they sat closer than ever. There was no ceremony yet, no ring, but there was something real between them, something chosen. And when she laid her head on his shoulder, Sawyer closed his eyes and knew. He would never walk alone again. They crossed into the Wind River Basin in early June, where the sagebrush spread wide and the sky pressed down in a pale, endless hush. The wagon train thinned as families split off toward homesteads or mining claims. The smell of pine grew thicker with every mile. By then, Cora rode beside Sawyer on his bay most mornings, her hands light on the reins though she kept her back straight, like she didn't quite trust the saddle to hold her. She said little during the day, but in the evenings, as dusk stretched long and quiet, her voice softened. She began to hum while washing tin plates in cold water, tunes without names. Sawyer didn't ask about them. He only listened. They spent their nights near a creek bed 2 miles off the main trail, where the cottonwoods leaned toward each other like old friends. He built the fire, she set the beans to boil, and they spoke between tasks, never rushing through the quiet. One evening she turned toward him as he stripped bark from kindling. "I had a book once," she said. "Just one. It was about a girl who lived alone in a tower. My mother found it in a second-hand pile and gave it to me for my 8th birthday." Sawyer paused mid-motion. "She read it to me every night for a year," Cora said. Even when her voice cracked toward the end, he looked at her. "What happened to it?" "The book," she nodded. "It got left behind in a barn outside North Platte. I tried to carry it, but the woman who hired me said I could only bring what fit in my apron." Sawyer didn't reach for her hand, but he shifted closer so their knees touched. The firelight caught the edge of her jaw, and for the first time she didn't pull away from the closeness. "You like stories, then," he said. "I still do. I just don't have any left." "You have mine," he answered. She tilted her head. "Have you lived something worth telling?" "I've lived quiet," he said, "but I'll give you every piece of it." She looked at the fire. "I want a roof someday, one that doesn't move." "You'll have it," he said. "I've got land staked west of Lander, small cabin. Needs shoring up, but the bones are solid." Her breath caught just once. "You didn't mention that before. You weren't ready to hear it before." She didn't speak after that, just leaned into him, warmth unspoken between them. By the end of the 2nd week, Cora had stopped walking behind the wagons. She rode beside him, her skirts dusty but her eyes clearer. The trail grew steeper, and weather shifted fast. One afternoon brought hail the size of hickory nuts, and Sawyer pulled her off the horse and under a low outcrop. He held his hat over her head until the sky cleared. Afterward, she brushed rock dust from her sleeves and looked at him. "You'll ruin that hat." "I've got another," he said. "You always give away what you have. Only to you." She reached for his arm then, not out of fear or thanks, just something quieter, a choice. They stopped riding with the wagons altogether by the time they reached South Pass. The trail forked, and most of the train turned south toward Fort Bridger. Sawyer led them west, toward the base of the Wind River Range. That night, they made camp near a stand of juniper. Cora warmed her hands around the coffee tin and watched the stars come out. "You miss anyone?" she asked. Sawyer stirred the coals. "Once, my brother died in the war. We were both too young," she nodded slowly. "I think we carry them with us, not like memories, more like weight. I think so too." She set down the tin and stood. "I want to see the place." He looked up. "The land, your cabin." "Your soil, I want to see where I'll plant something." He rose beside her. "We'll reach it in 4 days," he said, "if we push." "I don't mind dust," she said. "I mind not knowing what's ahead." He took her hand then, full and certain. "It's trees, a creek, a porch with one missing board. And room for 2. She smiled, but not wide, just enough to show she believed him. They packed early the next morning, rode steady through a valley thick with lupine. She didn't hum that day. Instead, she asked about the well, the chimney, the nearest neighbor. Each time he answered steady, and each time she nodded like she was fitting the pieces of herself into the shape of a home. And when the sun dropped behind the hills, she turned toward him in the saddle and said, "If the porch leans, I'll fix it." He grinned, slow and quiet. "Then we'll be just fine." By the time they reached the edge of Sawyer's land, the mountain winds had shifted warmer, pulling pines sent down through the draw. The cabin stood at the far end of a sloped clearing, where the grass grew in patchy bursts and the creek braided through the trees with a sound like breath. The roof held, though the eastern eave sagged against its own weight. A single window faced the clearing, its glass streaked but unbroken. Cora dismounted slow, boots touching soil that hadn't known her name until that moment. She didn't speak right away. Her gaze moved across the clearing, from the woodpile stacked lean against the wall to the crooked fence line bowing inward with snow rot. She walked 3 steps ahead of him, then crouched and laid her palm flat on the earth. "It's dry here," she said. "Most summers," Sawyer replied. "Creek stays steady through July, though. I dammed it once, but it didn't hold." She brushed her hand off on her skirt and stood. "We'll build a proper channel. Rocks, not timber." He smiled, but didn't reply. She had said we. Inside, the cabin was dark until he unlatched the shutters and let the light in. The floor was hard packed dirt with planks laid over it in places. A small stove leaned in the corner, iron belly rusted along the seams. The bed was built into the wall itself, rough frame. No mattress, just rope lattice and a folded wool blanket. Cora stepped inside and ran her fingers along the window frame. "Why didn't you live here sooner?" "I only finished the roof last fall," he said. "Didn't seem worth filling it in until someone else might share it." She turned toward him. "You built this for 2, I hoped," he said. She crossed to the hearth, knelt, and cleared the cold ashes with her sleeve. "We'll need more wood." "I'll cut it," he said. "You can rest." "I'd rather work," she said, rising. "I don't know what to do with stillness." He nodded once. "There's a maul behind the lean-to." "I'll fetch it." By sundown, the hearth was lit, and Cora had scrubbed the table clean with a handful of boiled pine needles. She didn't ask for help. She moved like someone who'd been told her place too many times and long ago decided to write her own. Sawyer watched from the stoop, sharpening the blade of his hunting knife, not to use it, but just to be near her. That night, they ate cornmeal and boiled greens with salt pork brought from the last trade outpost. Cora didn't speak through the meal, but not for lack of comfort. She chewed slow, eyes steady on the fire. Afterward, she set her tin plate aside and said, "When I was little, I thought home would be white lace curtains and a porch swing." He looked at her. "You disappointed?" She shook her head. "No. I think I just didn't know what home was until now." He didn't answer right away. The fire cracked, casting orange across the cabin walls. "You can hang lace curtains here if you want," he said softly. Cora leaned back against the wall beside the hearth. "I'd rather hang dried herbs. Basil, if it'll grow out here, it might. I'll try anyway." He set his knife back in its sheath and joined her on the floor. Their shoulders touched, bare and simple. "I had a dream once," she said. "I was standing in a field and everything was quiet, no voices, no footsteps behind me. Just wind. I thought maybe that's what peace felt like." He turned his head. "And now?" She didn't look at him, but her fingers found his and laced through. "Now I think it's this," she said. They sat that way until the fire crumbled down to red coals. No declarations, just nearness. No promises, just weight given to stillness. When they rose to sleep, she followed him to the built-in bed. He unrolled the second blanket, laid it beside his own. She looked at it, then at him. "I don't need a second blanket." He held her gaze. "Only if you're sure." She stepped closer. "I've never been more." He pulled her gently to him, and they lay down together, not rushed, not claimed, just held. Her head found the crook of his neck. His arm curved around her spine. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. Inside, the fire sighed low. And as she drifted to sleep, her breath steady against his chest, Sawyer pressed his lips to her hair and whispered, "This is ours now. Not a dream, not a promise, a life beginning." The days steadied into rhythm, quiet labor under the early summer sun. Evenings wrapped in the hush of pine and firelight. Cora rose before the light crested the ridge, barefoot on the cool floor as she swept ash from the hearth and boiled water with dried mint she'd found beside the creek. She didn't ask Sawyer if he liked the taste. She just set the tin cup beside his elbow while he laced his boots, and he drank it every time without a word. By mid-morning, she'd cleared a patch of earth near the south wall of the cabin, where the sun hit longest. The soil was stony and reluctant, but her hands were patient. She worked with a carved stick and her own weight, loosening roots and lifting rocks into a growing pile. Sawyer offered to bring a plow blade down from the old shed, but she shook her head. "If I can't shape it with what I've got, we'll plant somewhere else," she said. He didn't argue. He'd started to understand that when Cora set her hands to something, it wasn't worth stepping between her and the work. That afternoon, Sawyer returned from the far tree line with a deer slung behind his saddle. He found her kneeling over the garden bed, fingers dark with earth, hair bound back in a strip of torn muslin. She didn't look up right away, just said, "Got anything worth salting?" He slid the deer to the ground. "Plenty." She stood, brushing soil from her palms. "I'll boil water, you skin." They worked side by side without needing to speak. The knife slid smooth under Sawyer's fingers, and Cora laid kindling under the iron pot without needing to tend the fire twice. When the meat was packed in brine, and the hide stretched flat behind the cabin, they sat together on the stoop, the light turning gold over the edge of the distant hills. Cora leaned her head back against the doorframe and said, "My mother used to sing while she worked. I never could. Always felt like it made the quiet too thin." Sawyer turned his head. "You miss her most when the world's loud or when it's quiet, when it's fair," she said. "When the day goes clean and nothing hurts, that's when I hear her voice like she's close enough to touch." He nodded slowly. I think the ones we lose come back when we finally have something good to show them. Cora didn't speak, but her fingers slid over his. She didn't hold tight. She just rested there, like quiet agreement. That night they lay on the rope bed while the wind caught the edge of the shutters. The fire had burned low and the air tasted of pine smoke and salt. Cora turned toward him, face half in shadow. "I never thought I'd reach a place where I could stop running," she said. "You're not running now." "No, but I still check the door before I sleep, still keep my shoes close." "You don't need to," he said. "I know. But it takes a while to unlearn." He reached for her hand beneath the blanket and held it between both of his. "You can keep the shoes nearby as long as you want." She gave a sound that was almost a laugh. "You say things like that, and it makes me wonder how long you've been waiting for someone to stay." He looked at her without blinking. "Since the war ended." She didn't answer for a long while. Then, softly, "I don't know how to be someone's wife. Not the way people talk about it. I don't want someone else's idea of a wife. I want you." Cora shifted until her forehead rested against his. "Then I'll stay." They lay without speaking after that, the air between them warm enough to hold. The old knots and bruises inside her didn't vanish, but they softened, eased by the steady weight of belonging. In the morning, she didn't check the door. She left her shoes by the hearth. The first rain came in late June, soft and steady, tapping against the cabin walls like someone asking to be let in. It rolled off the roof in silver threads, and the garden Cora had coaxed from the rocky ground darkened with gratitude. She stood at the threshold with her sleeves rolled, watching the water collect in the shallow furrows she'd carved by hand. Behind her, Sawyer hung his coat on the peg and stepped up beside her, close enough to feel the heat where their arms brushed. "You ever see rain like this in Missouri?" he asked. "No," she said. "Ours came hard and fast, broke things before you had time to close the shutters." He leaned against the frame. "This kind's better. It stays long enough to do good," she said. They didn't say more. The rhythm of the rain had its own kind of speech. By the following morning, puddles had sunk into the dry trail ruts, and the air carried the thick, clean smell of wet cedar. Cora took her time packing dried meat into muslin sacks, while Sawyer sorted through a box of nails salvaged from the collapsed barn across the ridge. He held up a crooked one and set it aside. "We'll need to trade for more," he said. "We can ride to the store past the canyon," Cora offered. "That man in the blue vest said they get a shipment every full moon." Sawyer raised an eyebrow. "You want to ride with me?" "I'm not sending you alone," she said. "I want to pick out the fabric myself," he straightened. "For what?" "I'm going to sew curtains for the window," she said. "Not lace. Just something blue." He smiled slow. "Blue sounds right." They set out 2 days later, riding side by side through the pass, the horses' hooves muffled against the damp earth. Cora tied her braid back with a strip of checked cloth and kept her eyes on the ridgelines. She didn't speak until they reached the narrow bend where the trail overlooked a steep drop. "People used to say I was too quiet," she said. "I don't mind your quiet," Sawyer said. "I trust it more than talk," she nodded. "I never liked filling space just to hear myself." He glanced at her. "I used to wonder if love meant needing to say everything. And now I think it's knowing when not to." The trading post sat low and square among juniper, its plank walls sun-bleached, and the paint on the sign cracked near the corners. A mule was tied out front, and a woman in a wide-brimmed hat came out carrying a bag of flour. Cora dismounted without help and walked straight inside, her boots firm on the floorboards. Sawyer followed, keeping a few steps behind as she moved down the shelves with purpose. She selected calico in a deep blue with tiny white flowers, then added thread and a tin of lye soap. When he reached for a tin of oil, she lifted an eyebrow. That for the hinges. That and the stove door. She nodded once, then turned to the counter. The storekeeper, an older man with tobacco-stained fingers, eyed her as she counted coins into his hand. "You folks settling nearby?" he asked. Sawyer stepped forward. "Few miles north, near the creek bend. Plenty of folks tried that land. Most didn't stay." "We're not most," Cora said. The man blinked, then nodded slowly. "Well then, good luck to you." They rode home with the sun dipping low behind them and the weight of the saddle lessened by the quiet between them. Cora rested her hand on Sawyer's thigh as they shared the saddle the last mile, her head tucked into the curve of his jaw. 3 days later, the curtains were hung. They shifted gently in the breeze from the open window, carrying the smell of pine and damp earth into the room. Cora stood back and studied them without speaking. Sawyer came in from splitting kindling and leaned his axe against the doorframe. "You like them?" she asked. "They look like they've always belonged." She turned to face him, her hands still at her sides. "So do I." He crossed the room and cupped her face in both hands, his thumbs brushing the curve of her jaw. "You do." When he kissed her, it was unhurried, like reading a page you never want to finish. Her hands found his shoulders, and for a long while the world outside waited. That night they laid together with the window open, the curtains rustling at the edges. Cora's cheek rested on his chest, her breath slow and even. "I want to be married proper," she said. "I'll ride to the mission in Lander," he said. "Get the license. They'll send a circuit rider. I don't need much, just you and a day that feels honest." He kissed her temple. "Then we'll do it right." 2 weeks later, under a sky the color of wild violets, they stood at the creek's edge while a white-haired preacher read from memory. No guests, no rings. Just her hair braided with a ribbon and his hand steady in hers. She said her vows without trembling. He answered without pause. When the preacher finished, he tipped his hat and rode on. They stayed at the water's edge, boots sinking in the soft bank, fingers entwined. "I don't know what kind of wife I'll be," Cora said. "You'll be mine," Sawyer said. "That's all I've ever needed." Years passed and the cabin grew fuller. Cora's herbs hung thick from the rafters, and the garden yielded onions, beans, and carrots that she traded for flour and lamp oil. Sawyer built a second room off the back, and they filled it with shelves and a rocking chair he carved himself. Sometimes she sang low while she shelled peas, her voice barely more than breath. They never spoke of the trail again. It had led them here, and that was enough. Each night, they lay down with their hands clasped between them. Love didn't need to be spoken. It lived in the things they built, the meals they shared, the way he always left the firewood stacked just high enough for her to reach. And every morning, when she opened her eyes to the light spilling past the blue curtains, she turned toward him and whispered, "I'm still here." He always answered the same way, with a kiss to her brow and the words, "So am I." They grew old that way, with nothing loud between them but the wind through the trees and everything true quiet at their backs. When the world changed beyond the ridge, it did so without troubling them, and they stayed together, warm in their cabin, with the garden full and the fire steady.